about it. Now to Republican Senator Mike Lee's take on the shutdown. He tweets, "The message behind Obama administration's shutdown bullying is the same message sent by the IRS's abuses of political opponents. Do what I say or else." Senator Lee joins us. So it doesn't sound like there's much negotiating.
No, there's not. And, really what we see when we look at the first week or week and a half of shutdown, we see the very best argument we could ever make against Obamacare. Let me explain what I mean. So just the other day, you had a National Park Service ranger tell the Washington Times, "We've been told to make things as difficult for people as we possibly can." They're using the shutdown as an excuse to make things painful, shutting down things like Mount Vernon, even though it's privately owned, shutting down things like the Claude Moore Colonial Farm in McLean, Virginia, privately owned, privately operated, and they're shutting it down. Why? Because they want to make things difficult. This is leverage for them to get their way politically. What happens when we give more power to the government? What happens when we put the federal government in charge of really personal decisions involving our health care? That really should cause a lot of Americans to be concerned.
I'd like to know who actually makes these decisions. It's sort of this sort of vague thing, and some people will assign it to President Obama. I don't think President Obama actually made the decision to shut down the World II Memorial. However, I think he has the authority to open it up. He's on notice. And likewise, I don't like the idea that the gym in the House is open. Speaker Boehner's office apparently kept it open. His office didn't say Speaker Boehner, but Speaker Boehner has the authority to shut it down. It's not a lot of money, but it's a principle. So I don't understand, who is making these decisions? And let's start naming names, and we probably won't have it happen as much. Ultimately,
the buck does stop with him, and you're exactly right. Regardless of whether he himself pulled the trigger on closing down the World War II Memorial.
Open it up. Order it up.
It's his prerogative to open it up. And they had to work pretty hard, of course, to shut that thing down. They had to create doors in the first place so that they could lock those doors and keep people out.
What's really disheartening, though, you have the situation where the House today voted for the military benefits. And rather than having that piece of legislation go over to the Senate doesn't want to consider the stuff piecemeal, is that now we have the president having to cut a private deal with a private organization to do it because the Senate doesn't want to fall in the sort of the politically unattractive position of deciding something piecemeal. And so we see that we're all just sort of pawns as everyone's sort of playing and jockeying for position. And it's really unfair to the American people.
It's unfair and it's shameful. I mean, look, it's not everyone in the Senate that doesn't want that to move forward. We had our Republican whip in the Senate, John Cornyn, brought it up for a unanimous consent request, trying to say, let's pass this unanimously, just like we passed unanimously the provision providing for active duty military pay last week. But Harry Reid wouldn't allow it to happen. The Senate Democrats won't let us fund anything unless we're willing to fund everything. Meanwhile, the president and his people are doing everything they can to make life difficult as they can for Americans. This is why we shouldn't give them control over our health care system.
Congressman Van Hollen says that for the last 6 months that they've been trying to get the House to send conferees over to negotiate the budget, and the Republicans have not permitted that.
One reason, and one reason only for that. They have wanted to skip several steps along the way. There are other ways that we could have gotten to a conference committee. They wanted to do it by a unanimous consent request rather than introducing the House-passed budget in the Senate and allowing that to be considered for amendments. In that unanimous consent request, we asked one very simple request. Assure us that you won't raise the debt limit in connection with the budget resolution. Those are two separate things. We shouldn't be raising the debt limit in connection with the budget. They refused to take that off the table. They wanted to make it easier to raise the debt limit, and we said we don't want you to be able to do that.
So we're not any closer. In other words, Senator, nice to see you, sir.